But I just want to spend just a couple of moments right now talking about, well, why should we give? Or why does God call you and I to be a part of something like this? Why should we do as a church, should we be part of this thing called Beyond? And I've got two reasons. I could probably give you a few more, but let me just distill it if I can in the moments that we've got to. I think two compelling reasons, two, I think, essential reasons that this work of Beyond and this offering today is so significant. And here's the first reason I believe that we should partner together and give into Beyond. And that's this. The first reason is because we believe with all of our heart that this is what church is all about. Like, this is what church is all about. You see, we have this idea clear in our hearts and mind that we're not just called as a church community to come to church and then just go home. Like, we're not that, like, the extent of what God has called us to do is not just what we do when we come together for 90 minutes or so on Sunday and then we go home. No, God calls us to something far bigger than that. God calls us to live on mission. And God actually has called us as His followers, as ones who put our faith in Him. We're actually called to help and to serve and to love and to encourage and to care for and to show kindness to the people around us. And you say, why would God call us to do that? Because that is who God is. That is actually who God is. He's a God who's on a mission to touch every single human heart with His love. That's His mission. That's His vision. That every single human heart, every single human being would be touched by His love. And when Jesus spoke to His followers in the book of Matthew, He said this to them, first of all. He said, Matthew 5, verse 13, He said, you are the salt of the earth. So Jesus uses this metaphor, salt. Now, I know that's a metaphor that's sometimes used in a different way, be salty. He didn't mean a bit like that. He said, no, the metaphor he was using, he says, I want you to be salt. I want you to be salt. What he was saying was this, is as Christians, every place you go where you find things that don't taste so good, make them taste better. In other words, every situation where something and you find something that's difficult for someone, make it better. Every place you go where things aren't going well for someone, make them better. He's saying, I want you to be salt. But then he didn't stop there. Then he said in Matthew 5, verse 14, he says, you are the light of the world. You see, Jesus is telling Christians not only to be salt, he says, I want you to be light as well. In other words, not only make every place that you go better, I want you to make it brighter as well. Everywhere you go, I want you to be marked by the fact every place you go, every person that you touch, you're going to make things better and you're going to make things brighter for them. And then I love it. Jesus says, I want you to live like that. I want you to live so you make things better and you make things brighter for people wherever you go. But then actually Jesus, he actually points us to an even higher purpose. He says this in Matthew 5, verse 14, he says, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. I love those two words. Jesus says that they. In other words, there's a reason for what we do. He says that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Jesus is saying there's a higher purpose to the way that we live as Christians. There's a bigger why that should always motivate us in our serving, in our encouraging, in our kindness, in our generosity to others, in our looking after people. He says that they would see your good deeds and glorify God who is in heaven. That I pray that when we step into people's worlds, when we show them love and kindness, that maybe their response would be, oh, you know what? No one has ever treated me like this before. Could you tell me a little bit more about your faith? I'm interested in a God who loves people like that. I'm interested in hearing more about a God who serves people like that. I'm interested in a God who opens his arms of kindness to people like that. I'd like to know a little bit more about that God. And here's the second reason I believe that you and I are called to be a part of this day today and partner together. And that's this: we're blessed to be a blessing. We're blessed to be a blessing. See, here's the way it works. The more God blesses us, the more God expects us to be a blessing to others. So what happens is God blesses us with a purpose that actually not only to take care of us, because he does, but now that we have more, that we could also give more. But the more God blesses us, the more God expects that we would be a blessing to others. Jesus said in Luke 12, verse 48, he says, much is required from those to whom much is given, for their responsibility is greater. Do you know in the Jewish tradition, I found there's this fascinating thing. It's been part of the Jewish tradition literally for thousands of years. And it's linked to the idea of the inheritance. And it's actually linked to what we're doing today, what we're talking about today. You see, here's the thing. When a Jewish dad gave his inheritance to his kids, no matter how many kids were in that family, the oldest child got 50%, and all of the remaining kids had to divide the remaining 50%. So Wendy and I have 3 kids. That would mean that we gave our inheritance, 50% of that inheritance, to the oldest child, and then the other 2 kids would have to divide the remaining 50%, 25% each. I'm hearing right now, all of the middle children that are here today, all of the youngest children going, yeah, I thought that was the case. Those older, they always got the preferential treatment, didn't they? Gosh. But you know what? You hear that and you read that and go, oh, that's kind of like favoritism, right? Like, is that like a father playing favorites with the older child? But it actually wasn't. You see, here's the thing. In the Jewish tradition, the son, the firstborn son, is actually a sign of the father's strength, they used to call it. What it means is this, is that a son is given double for this reason, that if the dad ever dies, that son is to be like the dad and then take care of all of the other children. You see, the firstborn was blessed so that the firstborn could be a blessing to the others. He was supposed to represent the father's strength. He was supposed to represent the father's love to all of the other children. He was supposed to represent the father's generosity to all of the other children. And the reason that the firstborn was blessed with more was because he had been given the responsibility by the father to take care of all the other brothers and sisters. Isn't that amazing? You say, well, that's amazing, but that's the Jewish tradition, right? So what does that have to do with us here today? What does that have to do with us as Christians here today? Well, let's go to the New Testament. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 22, it says, you have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. See what it says? It says when God sees the church, he calls us the church of the firstborn. Do you know why God considers the church the firstborn? He's saying as the firstborn, when you and I put our faith in Jesus, he says, you know what? God blesses everyone on planet Earth, but he blesses those who trust in him with even more. He wants us as the church, he wants us as believers to have more joy, more love, more peace, more provision that comes from him. Why? So that we can just have more? No, so that you and I could be the representative of the Father's generosity, a representative of the Father's strength, a representative of the Father's compassion, a representative of the Father's kindness. He says, you are the firstborn. I bless you with more so that you would take my responsibility upon your shoulders and be a blessing to all of those around you. Church, our Father in heaven blesses us with so much because why? His vision is that you and I would rise up and be a blessing to all of those that are around us. And Lighthouse Church, our vision for you beyond is simple. It's let's be the light and love of Jesus to people everywhere. Wherever we go, whatever we do, let's be salt. Let's make things better. Let's be light. Let's make things brighter. Why? So that they will see the love and the grace and the goodness and the kindness of God as it operates through us. That as God works through us, that we can show the world around us what the love of Jesus is really like. Just before we give, 2 Corinthians 8 verse 7. The Apostle Paul is talking to a church in Corinth. He's trying to encourage them in their giving. They're actually taking up an offering in this passage of Scripture, which is to go to help the impoverished in the church in Jerusalem. He speaks about all kinds of things related to giving, but I want to draw your attention to what he says. 2 Corinthians 8 verse 7, he says, but since you excel in everything, he's like, church, you're excelling in everything, in your faith, in your speech, in your knowledge, in your earnestness, your passion, in this love we have kindled in you. See that you also excel in the grace of giving. I love that. The Apostle Paul talks to us and says, you know what giving is? Giving is not just an act we do. Giving is not just something that we feel like we do because it's a good idea. He says giving is a grace. You know what grace is? Grace is God's power working in us and through us to do what we cannot do on our own. Church, on our own, we could never do anything like that. But I tell you what, when we have a grace on us as a church, when we partner together to give, I tell you what, the amount of lives that can be touched and impact is far beyond what we can do on our own. And so church, today I want to encourage us, each one of us today, let us be a church that excels in the grace of giving.